looking into all sorts of corruption and some of the problems they've had over the years. I think it's one of the primary reasons he got elected. His reputation, absolutely sterling. And it's an honor to be with you. And we spoke a couple of times, as you probably remember. And they'd like to hear every single word, and we give them every single word. And then they'll say, well, what about today? And I think the press would like to stay in the meeting, but we have lots of witnesses if you'd like to have it. But the country of, our country is doing phenomenally well. We have the best economy we've ever had. We have the best employment numbers that we've ever had. We have now almost 160 million people working, which is more than we've ever had. So we're doing very well in every respect. And I have a feeling that your country is going to do fantastically well. And whatever we can do.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to me to be here. And it's better to be on TV than by phone.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Mr. President, thank you very much. And I'm not the first time, truly say, in New York.
Right.
But I know that you've never been in Ukraine.
That's right.
And your predecessor also, how to say it in English, didn't find time.
Right.
So, can you give me a word that you will come to our great country?
Well, I'm going to try. And I know a lot of people, I will say this, I know a lot of people from Ukraine. They're great people. And I owned something called the Miss Universe pageants years ago, and I sold it to IMG. And when I ran for president, I thought maybe it wouldn't be the greatest thing to own the Miss Universe and Miss USA pageants, but it's a great thing. And we had a winner from Ukraine, and we got to know the country very well in a lot of different ways. But it's a country, I think, with tremendous potential.
Yes, I know it, because I'm from that country.
Right.
And I want to thank you for invitation to Washington.
Right.
You invited me. But I think, I'm sorry, but I think you forgot to tell me the date. But I think in the nearest future.
They'll tell you the date.
Oh, yes, they know before us. And I want to thank you, especially, Mr. President, to USA, to your government. Like I said, that I know many people, many faces. It's like the second family after my Ukrainian family. We know each other. Thank you for your support. Especially now when we have two wars in Ukraine. The first one is with corruption, but we'll fight. No, we'll be winner in this fight, I'm sure. And my priority is to stop the war on Donbass and to get back our territories, Crimea, Donbass, Lugansk. Thank you for your support. In this case, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And if you remember, you lost Crimea during a different administration, not during the Trump administration.
Yeah, so you have chance to help us.
That's right, I did. But that was during the Obama administration that you lost Crimea. And I didn't think it was something that you should have, but that was done a long time ago, and I think it was handled poorly. But it's just one of those things. One of the elements that we discussed is the United States helps Ukraine, but I think that other countries should help Ukraine much more than they're doing. Germany, France, the European Union nations, they really should help you a lot more. And I think maybe together we'll work on that. They have to feel a little bit guilty about it because they don't do what they should be doing. You're very important to the European Union. You're very important, strategically very important, and I think they should spend a lot more in helping Ukraine. And they know that also, and they actually tell me that, but they don't seem to produce. So I'm sure you'll talk to them, and I'll certainly be talking to them.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now I want to tell you that we now load the new country. And I'm sorry, but we don't need help. We need support, real support. And we thanks everybody, thank all of the European countries which help us. But we also want to have more. But I understand. So only together, America and EU, only together we can stop the war. And we are ready. We just want to tell that we are, remember that we are the biggest country in Europe, but we want to be the richest one. It's true. It's in my heart.
Well, you know, you have great people in Ukraine, and you have very talented people
Very
in terms
smart.
of manufacturing, in terms of some of the things they do. And we're doing trading already, but we should be doing a lot more trading with Ukraine. But you have very talented people. They make great things at the top of the line, really. So that's very important. And the other thing is I've heard you actually have, over the last fairly short period of time, you've really made some progress with Russia. I hear a lot of progress has been made, and just keep it going. It'd be nice to end that whole disaster.
First of all, I want to tell you before the relations with Russia, I will prolong just 1 minute. I mean that you have to know, and I want Walt to know that now we have the new team, the new parliament, the new government.
Right.
So now we voted about 74 laws, new laws, which help for our new reforms, the land reform, big privatization, the law about concessions, that we reload the general prosecurity. And we launched the service secretary. Is it right, service secretary?
Yes, anti-corruption court as well.
An anti-corruption court. As we came, we launched the anti-corruption court. It began to work on the 5th of September.
Right.
It was after 5 days we had the new government. So we are ready. We want to show that we just come, and if you want to help us, so just let's do business cases.
Right.
We have many investment cases. We're ready.
And stop corruption in Ukraine, because that will really make you great. That will make you great personally, and it'll also be so tremendous for your nation in terms of what you want to do and where you want to take it. Thank you very much. It's a great honor.
Thank you very much, Mr.
President
President.
Zelensky, have you felt any pressure from President Trump to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden?
I think you read everything. So I think you read text. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be involved to democratic, open elections of USA. No, you heard that we had, I think, good phone call. It was normal. We spoke about many things, and so I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
President Trump,
Because you know what? There was no pressure. And you know there was, and by the way, you know there was no pressure. All you have to do is see it, what went on the call. But you know that. But you could ask the question, and I appreciate the answer. Go ahead.
Mr. President, would you like President Zelensky to do more on Joe Biden and investigate?
No, I want him to do whatever he can. This was not his fault. He wasn't there. He's just been here recently. But whatever he can do in terms of corruption, because the corruption's massive. Now, when Biden's son walks away with millions of dollars from Ukraine and he knows nothing, and they're paying him millions of dollars, that's corruption. When Biden's son walks out of China with $1.5 billion in a fund, and the biggest funds in the world can't get money out of China, and he's there for one quick meeting and he flies in on Air Force Two, I think that's a horrible thing. I think it's a horrible thing. But I'm going far beyond that. I know the president, and I've read a lot about Ukraine. I've read a lot about a lot of countries. He wants to stop corruption. He was elected, I think, number one on the basis of stopping corruption, which unfortunately has plagued Ukraine. And if he could do that, he's doing really the whole world a big favor. I know, and I think he's going to be successful.
Mr. President, on Rudy Giuliani, why do you think it's appropriate for your personal attorney to get involved in government business?
Well, you'd have to ask Rudy. I will tell you this, that Rudy's looking to also find out where the phony witch hunt started, how it started. You had a Russian witch hunt that turned out to be 2.5 years of phony nonsense. And Rudy Giuliani's a great lawyer. He was a great mayor. He's highly respected. I've watched the passion that he's had on television over the last few days. I think it's incredible the way he's done. What he's out is he wants to find out, where did this Russian witch hunt that you people really helped perpetrate, where did it start? How come it started? It was all nonsense. It was a hoax. It was a total hoax. It was a media hoax and a Democrat hoax. Where did it start? And Rudy's got every right to go and find out where that started. And other people are looking at that too. Where did it start? The enablers. Where did it all come from? It was out of thin air. And I think he's got a very strong right to do it. He's a good lawyer. He knows exactly what he's doing, and it's very important.
Mr. President, do you believe that the emails from Hillary Clinton, do you believe that they're in Ukraine? Do you think this whole thing...
I think they could be. You mean the 30,000 that she deleted?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they could very well. Boy, that was a nice question. I like that question. Because, frankly, I think that one of the great crimes committed is Hillary Clinton deleting 33,000 emails after Congress sends her a subpoena. Think of that. You can't even do that in a civil case. You can't get rid of evidence like that. She deleted 33,000 emails after, not before, after receiving the subpoena from the U.S. Congress. I mean, I've never heard. Now, she's done far worse than that, although I don't know how much worse it can be. But there were many other things she did that were wrong. But that's so obvious. She gets a subpoena from the United States Congress, and she deletes them. And then she said, as I remember it, that, oh, well, they had to do with the wedding and yoga. She does a lot of yoga, right? So they had 33,000 emails about the wedding of her daughter and yoga. I don't think so. How she got away with that one is just, but it's one of many. And it's corrupt government, because we have corruption also, Mr. President. We have a lot of corruption in our government. And when you see what happened with Hillary Clinton, when you see what happened with Comey and McCabe and all of these people, we have a lot of things going on here, too. Hopefully it's going to be found out very soon. But I think that a lot of progress has been made. A lot of progress has been made.
Will the military aid continue? Can you assure that it will continue in the future?
Well, we're working with Ukraine, and we want other countries to work with Ukraine. When I say work, I'm referring to money. They should put up more money. We put up a lot of money. I gave you anti-tank busters that, frankly, President Obama was sending you pillows and sheets. And I gave you anti-tank busters, and a lot of people didn't want to do that, but I did it. And I really hope that Russia, because I really believe that President Putin would like to do something, I really hope that you and President Putin get together and can solve your problem. That would be a tremendous achievement. And I know you're trying to do that.
Mr. President, did you ask the House Speaker
in the
to find
phone call, you said that you would look into Joe Biden. You would ask your prosecutor to look into the matter. Have you had that conversation?
Well, I think, no, I haven't, but I think that somebody, if you look at what he did, it's so bad. Where his son, he goes to China, he walks away with $1.5 billion. He goes to Ukraine and he walks away with $50,000 a month and a lot of money in addition to that. And the whole thing with the prosecutor in Ukraine. And he's on tape. This isn't like maybe he did it, maybe he didn't. He's on tape doing this. I saw this a while ago. I looked at it and I said, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like that. Now, either he's dumb or he thought he was in a room full of really good friends. Or maybe it's a combination of both in his case.
President Zelensky,
I heard your question. Thank you very much. Don't cry. I mean that we have independent country and independent general security. I can't push anyone, you know. That's it. That is the question. That is the answer. So I didn't call somebody or the new general security. I didn't ask him. I didn't push him. That's it.
Do you feel obligated to fulfill your promises to President Trump?
Sorry.
Ви почуваєтеся
У мене немає. Дякую. Я вам відповім. Зобов'язаним що?
Obligated to do what?
А зобов'язаним про що? Я нікому нічого не винен. Ви всі розумієте. Україна...
Ви двічі, принаймні, казали, що ви будете розслідувати...
Я сказав, що ми готові розслідувати. Україна незалежна країна і Генеральна прокуратура. Ви самі знаєте, у нас новий Руслан Рябошапка, дуже гарна, чесна людина. Ви знаєте, західний, із освітою, із західним досвідом. І чи буде він розглядати? Він повинен розглядати будь-які справи. Які тут можуть бути обіцянки? А?
I can.
Він вже розглядає цю.
Я впевнений, що у нього є, ви мене вибачте, але у нас є своя країна, Україна. У нас набагато є важливіших, багато більше важливіших, дійсно дуже важливих питань. І ви знаєте, це справи, це дійсно справи, які дуже важливі для кожного українця. Це Іловайськ, це Майдан, це корупція, про яку зараз говорив президент Трамп. І ви знаєте, над чим він працює. Тобто,
You want to just...
I'm sorry.
Concerning the investigation, actually, I want to underscore that Ukraine is an independent country. We have a new prosecutor general in Ukraine, a highly professional man with a Western education and history to investigate any case he considers and deems appropriate. Well, we have many more issues to care about and to tackle. We have Ilovaisk, we have Maidan, we have corruption cases, as President Trump rightly mentioned about that. So we know what to do and we know where to go, what to tackle.
President Trump, would it be okay to ask the Attorney General to be involved in this matter?
Go ahead.
President Zelensky.
Did you ask House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to find a way out of impeachment yesterday?
Not at all, no. Look, she's lost her way. She's been taken over by the radical left. She may be radical left herself, but she really has lost her way. I spoke to her about guns yesterday. She didn't even know what I was talking about. She's not interested in guns. I'll tell you what, Nancy Pelosi is not interested in guns and gun protection and gun safety. All she's thinking about is this. She's been taken over by the radical left, the whole Democrat Party. And you take a look at what's happening in the media today. The whole party is taken over by the left. And thank you very much. My poll numbers have gone up, but I don't want them to go up for this reason. When they look and when you see what's happening, people are really angry at Democrats. They're really angry at the Democrat Party. And things like, as an example, drug pricing, getting drugs down, things like gun safety, infrastructure. The Democrats can't talk about that because they've been taken over by a radical group of people, and Nancy Pelosi, as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, she's no longer the Speaker of the House. Thank you very much, everybody.
President Trump in New York City right now meeting with the president of Ukraine. This, of course, comes after the White House released what they're calling the transcript, the partial transcript of a call that he had with the Ukrainian leader. And this has really been at the center of scrutiny. House Democrats have launched a formal impeachment inquiry into the president yesterday. I want to bring in CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, who's in our Washington bureau, and CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper, who joins us from Capitol Hill. Molly, I want to start with you. I mean, we saw the Ukrainian president say, nobody pushed me. We know where to go and what to tackle. What did you make of this?
Well, I mean, President Trump did translate, of course, and said, of course, that means there was no pressure. The president of Ukraine essentially said, I did not pressure him, which is kind of interesting, having the president interject to translate for the Ukrainian president. But what I made of that is, really, when it comes to what's going on up here on Capitol Hill, I don't think it's going to move the Democrats in the House at all. Their whole beef with the call in the first place, even before they saw the transcript, had to do with the fact that the president of the United States was calling Ukraine and ostensibly soliciting, asking for foreign intervention in the 2020 election. That's how they see it. And again, I really don't think that what the president of Ukraine just said will matter much in terms of where they are going with this impeachment inquiry.
I want to put aside impeachment. I know that's a big story of the day, but Leslie, I want to get you to weigh in on this foreign policy aspect. It was almost painful to watch as you're seeing on a diplomacy front the president of Ukraine almost begging the president for time together. He says, you forgot to tell me what date we're going to meet together.
Very clever.
Pre-decision, decision didn't make time. And the president said, "Can you promise me?" Start it up. Can you promise me you're going to come to Ukraine? And he said, "I'll try." We know the president doesn't like to travel, far often, and it's been a complaint among other diplomats. It's hard to get FaceTime with him. But from a diplomatic standpoint, all of this is not just a Ukrainian issue. Just about every world leader is wondering if this president gets another 4 years, we're going to have to deal with him and we're going to have to make this work.
Well, the optics were certainly different for that case, but I thought there were some interesting aspects. When the president was talking about he is hoping for a, kind of a resolution in the issue with Ukraine and Russia, the pressure that he was putting on Putin and the Ukrainian president, I think that is probably one of the most significant things there. Talking about Crimea, that he was not the president at the time when there's been this, some call aggression, certainly aggression by Russia. So there's definitely a hardline approach that works for the Ukrainian president right now. That's what's distinctly different. It's also he's getting, you're exactly right, airtime and in an audience with the president, the leader of the free world, tremendously significant, not only in the time, the optics, but the weapons that he's now accessing. There's a distinct new relationship. And people, the Democrats, I'm going to argue, I agree with Molly completely, are going to be critical of that. They're going to say you're giving undue attention. But it's a different approach by the president. I think somebody who's objective will look at it and go, what is the success factor here? What is success going to look like? And that's still yet to be determined. And in many cases, the president hasn't defined that, which leaves a lot of speculation on both sides.
On the point Leslie was mentioning Crimea, Molly, he made President Trump made a point of saying, you lost Crimea on someone else's watch. It was President Obama. And then you see the president of Ukraine saying, but you have a chance to help us here. You have a chance to help us. And I just want to remind you, I think it was maybe a month ago, the president said that he would vote to put Russia back into the G7, which they were removed over the issue of Crimea. So, he is essentially begging the president of the United States, we don't need your help, is what he said. We need your support. Molly?
Well, that's true. However, going to Leslie's point, I love to ping pong Leslie. The president, and this is something that Adam Schiff, who said in a press conference earlier, he's the Intelligence Committee chairman, and he was saying, he even conceded that the United States did not do enough to help Ukraine in previous years, meaning when President Obama was in office. And this administration has stepped up and is giving military aid. And essentially, they're giving them the weapons they need to take on, or at least defend themselves against Russian incursion.
Yes, I'm just looking here. I've got a statement from Joe Biden on the release of the phone call transcript between Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president. And he says here, Congress must pursue the facts and quickly take prompt action to hold Donald Trump accountable. In the meantime, I will continue to focus my campaign not on how Donald Trump abused his power to come after my family, but on how he has turned his back on American families. Leslie, how is this going to be used by Donald Trump and his campaign on the campaign trail?
Sure. I think the language he's using, the abuse of power, he's trying to move into those kind of articles of impeachment, like language protocols in that sense. This is where the Republicans are going to say. They're going to say that the Democrats are so contemptuous toward the president. They're so blinded by their dislike of him, their desire to remove him. They're looking for any avenue to do that, that they're overreaching. They can't even wait till the transcript is disclosed. And for Biden to say, thank you, my hands are tied, I'm going to go on. I think the president raised points that are going to be heard by a lot of kind of voters in the red states when he's talking about there was corruption there. He's tying that back to Hillary Clinton. And I think people are tired of that record. But people that have a suspicion that there was a corruption that no one can deny of the influence in U.S. elections in 2016, and you talk about this under the umbrella of corruption, even though the president kind of wants it both ways. There was no corruption, but there's corruption. It's going to confuse the issue, and it's going to continue to look hyper-partisan. And that's the slope we're on. And we're going 80 miles an hour. And that's the challenge. I think any language that comes post this conference, this press event, or certainly with Speaker Pelosi.
Yeah, you mentioned Speaker Pelosi, Molly. He was actually said just a few moments ago, Nancy Pelosi is not Speaker of the House. Nothing has changed. I want you to know she still is Speaker of the House. But, he said that he did have a call. We know that he did. Still the Speaker. We know he did have a call with Nancy Pelosi. He talked about that. He said, I wanted to talk to her about guns. And she didn't have anything to say on that. She didn't care, is essentially what he was saying. What do we know? Do we know anything, Molly, about that conversation that Nancy Pelosi had?
Well, Nancy Pelosi wasn't getting into too many details, but when she's described this call in various settings, she actually made it sound like they did have a pretty substantial conversation on guns, and then they transitioned into this issue of the whistleblower, of the administration not allowing this whistleblower complaint to come to Capitol Hill, in which, and this is what a source close to Nancy Pelosi says, is that the president said, "Hey, my administration had nothing to do with that," and she said, "Well, undo it then." Essentially, allow this complaint to come up here. It's unclear, however, how much they did get into the whole topic of guns. And one point that I wanted to discuss on this, President Trump was pretty, dare I say, bold in going after Nancy Pelosi in the way he did during those remarks, because if there's one person you really don't want to fight with in Washington, D.C., it's Nancy Pelosi. She has longevity, she has memory, and she's got steely veins, and I'm telling you, she's not somebody I'd want to go head-to-head with, especially when facing potential articles of impeachment.
Yes. At the same point, though, Leslie, Nancy Pelosi has been put up sometime as the boogie woman, that he likes to present her. And there are folks within the president's party and his base that take that sentiment, and also the sentiment that he pushed forward today, saying other European countries need to pull their weight. I've heard from other voters, Republican voters, Leslie, who really believe in that message.
No, there's definitely a message for that. I think one thing we know for sure, if you're Speaker of the House, the opposition party is going to make you the enemy. It's going to be in fundraising letters. You can remember Newt Gingrich was like that, the Grinch that stole Christmas. I mean, it goes on and on. I like what Molly said about the steeliness, the kind of prowess of Speaker Pelosi. It cannot be denied. Forget your politics. She can navigate. But you get a sense that you're kind of losing all that control, especially by jumping the gun procedurally, by not really putting in the impeachment inquiry, and Molly could speak to that more intelligently, just kind of, and having Congress go through its regular procedure. It's going to, again, hyper-politicize a process that's already looking so political, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult, and it's going to calcify, in many ways, the Republican opposition to this, Republican members, and going to really put a lot of pressure on those Democratic members that won in Republican areas. So it's not that kind of convening. We all agree. There's a lot of Republicans that have come out today, said they read the transcript and there wasn't a lot of there. Mm-hmm. That creates even more confusion, I think, for American voters.
Molly, what do you make of the fact that he continued to support his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani?
You know what? What's interesting about that is I had a question earlier today. Somebody asked, well, will we see Rudy Giuliani up here on Capitol Hill in front of hearings? And I was thinking to myself, if Jerry Nadler had his way, probably yes. And something very similar to what happened last week with Corey Lewandowski would probably unfold in front of the House Judiciary Committee, and it becomes a political circus in which somebody like Rudy Giuliani is going to be saying, declaring attorney-client privilege, but going after and essentially filibustering during this hearing. So I don't know if he will be up here on Capitol Hill in a public forum, because again, a lot of Democrats were very upset last week at the way that Corey Lewandowski hearing was handled. It made them look disorganized, unfocused. And the one aspect of this whole recent rapid impeachment, push for impeachment, came about because of this Ukraine and the Ukraine phone call. And I think that you have more moderate Democrats in the House of Representatives who are saying we have got to focus like a laser on this one aspect, call it national security. We have national security concerns with the president, and not get taken away with these various tangents and on these various investigations. And so I think that Leslie's right. It seems like Nancy Pelosi seized on the momentum that came from the initial, the initial outrage at allegations that the president, again, was digging for dirt from a foreign government on his political opponent. But in terms of actually getting the nuts and bolts of how the whole thing is going to proceed, in terms of who's going to lead it, who's going to do the questioning, how long is it going to take, what's the timeline, are there going to be articles of impeachment, that's just unclear. And really, they have very little time to get it together.
Leslie, if this does go to impeachment or any sort of impeachment inquiry at this point, who do you think benefits from this? Does the Trump campaign benefit more? Biden hurt more? How does this affect both the Republican and the Democratic Party?
It's a no-win on both sides, Rita. There's no winner in this. I mean, the president can talk about his poll numbers going up, and in some base, and there's an argument to be made that from a tribal perspective, yes, kind of circle the wagons. This is just the Democrats doing what they do because they refuse to work, as the president's laying out, on issues like border security, infrastructure, healthcare, prescription drug costs, and all the things that he's laying out, gun reform. But they're so blinded by impeachment. It's a fever pitch, and now Nancy Pelosi can't control it anymore. That's going to work for a lot of voters. On the Democratic side, it sours. The problem is it sours the whole electoral process. I mean, people just cannot, and especially young voters who are coming to this, they think that this is the way kind of politics as usual. This is not the way that politics used to be. It was not this partisan. You almost want to protect those centrist and those moderate Democrats. And people are trying to see. I talked to some voters, diehard Republican voters today, and they said, look, if there's a there, if there's a smoking gun, if it's consistent, Republicans come on board, nobody's above the law. And then they read the transcript and said, oh, gosh, this is just politics as usual. Again, undermining a really important process. And I think that's why I feel we all lose.
Leslie Sanchez, Molly Hooper, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both for joining us. Okay, a quick break. We've got the rest of the day's news up next. You're streaming CBS app.